Harris County has one of the most diverse voting demographics in the country. Two of the groups we're watching closely during this election are females and minority voters. Joining me live in Studio A this morning is Dr. Carla Brailey with Texas Southern University to talk about the impact these voters could have on today's election. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It's going to be a long day.
That's right. And night.
And night. And night. And maybe even tomorrow.
Agreed.
Talk to us about the role these voters, particularly women and minority voters, are playing in this election.
I think everyone wants them.
Yeah.
I think that we know that there probably will be some type of increase, but we also know that they have, done all they could to, I would say, recruit the voters, but also on the staffing side, I think both sides has a diverse amount of staffing that they've had to really reach out to the voters. But in terms of issues related to reproduction, economic opportunity, these are things that are really important, and we're seeing that women have been on the front line of these as voters and making a determination because they are showing up.
Yeah.
And not only are they showing up, but they're voting like they say they're going to vote. And I think that we're going to see probably even an increase in this particular election. We can go back to 2020, but there were so many factors that were in play there that I think this election is going to really give us the numbers we need to even make some further projections on the increase that we'll see even later on in upcoming years.
Looking forward. Yeah, certainly front and center. A lot of life has been lived in these past 4 years. Talk to us about any trends you've noticed, whether it be in the shift of women and minority voters taking to the polls this election.
Well, I think the trends. I think they're organized even within. I think it's one thing to be a voter, but I think it's another also to be organized, to mobilize within their own villages and within their own communities. And I think we're seeing that the activity that we saw with Divine Nine, Mi Familia, those organizations, they're working in masses now to get out this vote. We know that particularly in Texas, around the nation, but in Texas and Harris County, if we push out the vote, we know that a lot of voters are moving towards that more progressiveness in terms of whether it be equal economic opportunity, whether it is related to health care. We know that those issues are very prevalent, and so that determines the increase.
You've called out a few of those issues, whether it be reproductive rights, health care, economic opportunities. When we look at those issues as a whole, those topics, are there differences among these groups?
Yeah, I think that if you consider maybe more white female voters, they're probably on the lines of maybe economic growth, safety factors. I think when you look at more Latino and Black women, I would say that it's more geared around health care. Some of those populations also, health care is directly connected to being caretakers of their communities, which brings them even closer to the health care system. When you look at Black women and Black maternal health, more likely, unfortunately, 3 times more likely to have some health complications. So I think those are some differences, even in terms of the opportunities on the economic in the economic space as well.
Earlier in this conversation, Dr. Brailey, you mentioned, these candidates have both gone to extreme lengths to reach these voters. What has it, looking at both campaigns, both the Trump campaign and the Harris campaign, what has it been that resonated most with these communities, with these women, with these voters?
I think reproduction health, reproductive justice, anything around, regardless of the ideology with that, I think both sides have an opinion on that, and and I think that it may have been underestimated to a certain degree on certain sides, but I think it is playing a huge role on the activity that women have had. I mean, from the T-shirts we see, from the targeted ads that we see via social media, I think reproductive health is extremely important.
Whether their
here.
messages are resonating, they are connecting.
I think so. On both sides,
Yeah.
they're really aiming to do that. Immigration has been huge, and we know that that has played a role on some determination on either side that you're finding yourself as a voter. The economic piece, inflation, I think both have tried, but I think we're still struggling to kind of figure out what's next.
Connect the dots there,
yeah.
on what that's going to look like for plans. Have female and minority voters become more active in local politics of recent, particularly this election?
Well, I think the numbers from this election are really going to show us how active they are becoming and what the increase is. But I think that obviously the voting population is increasing. We've had an influx in terms of more diverse voters. But I think the level of campaigning, and outside of the state of Texas, I think you can pay almost maybe about $15 or so for a voter. We're not there yet in the state of Texas in terms of that investment that we will need to make to continue to move forward. But I think that the increase is there in terms of how we're organizing, whether that's through targeted audience. I mean, social media is having an impact all around. So that is also increasing, but also some of the grassroots organizations and how they are incorporating women and minorities, the flux to go after young voters, college voters. I mean, they're putting the money behind it. I think also how they're organizing around elected officials to just really reach out with these collegiate voters that maybe have not done so in the past years, but I think that will continue to increase.
You mentioned the future. I want to end by looking forward. You mentioned that we hopefully will get the numbers, the data we need to accurately depict on what women voters and minority voters the roles they will play in the future. Talk to us about the influence that they will have looking forward.
I think it's showing that about 70% of our new voters will be a very diverse population, and we know that that is normally connected to progressive issues, and so I think that is going to depict or impact the shift that we're going to see in the state of Texas. I think by 2030, we're going to see a substantial amount of changes, but this election, I think, will help us to make better predictions about gauging it. 2020, I mean, we could talk about that, but so much happened in 2020 from COVID, economic recovery. People had a lot more time to do their research. I mean, so it was just a different time frame.
Makes perfect sense. Dr. Brailey, always a pleasure chatting with you. I think we're going to have to continue this conversation later this week or even next week when we start getting those numbers.
Anytime you invite me.
Fascinating.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming on this morning. We do appreciate it.